Her name was Miss Harmony. In the early 1980s, she was a music teacher at a high school nestled in a small town in New England. Known for her long, slender fingers and meticulously chosen elegant dresses, she commanded both admiration and fear among her students. The melodic sounds that emanated from her piano keys were as much a part of her identity as the ruthless discipline she imposed on her students. In her classroom, the harmony of music was matched only by the strict rhythm of discipline. Miss Harmony sought to introduce her students to the perfect world of music, but in doing so, she also taught them the meaning of fear. The slightest mistake, a wrong note, or a slip in rhythm would invoke her wrath, which would descend upon the students like a storm. In her class, fear was a constant background melody. One day, Miss Harmony, while at her piano in the midst of a sonata, stopped abruptly. The students, holding their breath, waited for what was to come next, but Miss Harmony collapsed onto the floor and never rose again. Her heart had played its final note and succumbed to silence. But Miss Harmony's story didn't end there. In the school's old corridors, especially after midnight, the sound of piano music began to be heard. Everyone believed that Miss Harmony's spirit still wandered the music room. Students, upon hearing the piano melodies echoing through the halls at night, would shut their eyes tight and rush to their rooms. It was believed that if they dared to listen to Miss Harmony's sonata, it would be their end. And if a student, overcome by curiosity, peeked into the music room, they would see only an empty piano. But they would notice the keys moving on their own, the dreadful sonata being played by a ghostly touch. And that student, if lucky enough to live to tell the tale, would know that the cursed melody of Miss Harmony would never leave their ears. So, if you ever find yourself in the corridors of an old school at midnight and hear the distant sound of a piano, do not seek out its source. For Miss Harmony might be inviting you to an eternal silence with her music. Selina's footsteps echoed in the dark alley. It was midnight and the city was shrouded in silence. Returning from her friend's house, Selina chose to take a shortcut through the narrow streets of the old neighborhood. She tightly gripped her bag and began to walk briskly. A few minutes later, she heard faint footsteps behind her. At first, she tried to ignore the sound, thinking perhaps someone else was also heading in the same direction. However, the footsteps grew louder and more distinct. Selina began to suspect she was being followed. She paused for a moment and looked back. In the darkness, she saw a vague silhouette. She immediately picked up her pace, and her pursuer did the same. Selina's heart raced. She pulled out her phone, intending to call the police, only to find its battery had died. At an upcoming bend, she decided to hide in an old storage room. Leaving the door slightly ajar, she entered and held her breath. When her pursuer reached the bend, he lost sight of her. After searching around for a while, he turned back and disappeared from view. When Selina reached her home, she quickly locked the door and drew the curtains. She was still trembling from the terrifying experience. Feeling safe in her home, she took a glass of water and went to the living room. Taking a deep breath, she replayed the night's events in her mind. After a while, she noticed slight movement outside. Approaching the window, she saw a shadowy figure in the darkness. It was her pursuer. The man was watching her from outside the window. Selina's heart felt like it would stop. When their eyes met, a chilling smile appeared on the man's face. Selina immediately grabbed her phone and called the police. She quickly explained the situation and asked for help. The pursuer continued to wait outside the window. Selina decided to hide somewhere inside her house. However, after a while, she noticed the movement outside had stopped. Looking out the window again, she saw the man had left. A few minutes later, the police arrived. Selina recounted the night's events in detail. The police began to review security camera footage from the area to identify the man. Selina decided to spend the night at a friend's house, feeling unsafe in her own home. The next day, the police identified the pursuer from the security footage. He was a man with a criminal record for similar offenses. After this harrowing experience, Selina decided to install security systems in her home. That night she realized that safety is never guaranteed. A few days later, when Selina returned home, she found an envelope at her doorstep. Her name was written on it, but there was no sender's name. Inside, she found a short handwritten note. "I'm watching you." Chills ran down Selina's spine. She had a hunch about who sent it. The next day at the same time, she found another note. "You can't escape." Selina took these notes to the police. They examined them and decided to run a fingerprint analysis. However, no fingerprints were found on the notes, indicating the professionalism of her pursuer. As days passed, the notes increased. Each note filled Selina with more dread. Messages like, "I'll find you wherever you go," and "My eyes are always on you." Disturbed by this, Selina decided to leave the city for a while. However, when she reached her out-of-town residence, she found another note. "Wherever you go, I'm always with you." This was the last straw for Selina. She approached the police again and requested protection. The police set up a covert observation point near Selina's house to catch the pursuer. A few days later, as the pursuer approached Selina's house, he was apprehended by the police. He was a man with a history of similar crimes and had become obsessed with Selina. After this incident, Selina sought therapy to address her trauma. Over time, she managed to overcome her fears and resumed her life. "My family's name has been etched into the history of New England's elite for generations. The Silverwoods, a lineage of old money and power, where business mergers often came with a marriage certificate. It was an unspoken rule that we were to marry within our circle, for wealth and influence to remain tightly knit. This detail is crucial for the tale I'm about to unfold. I was but a child when the incident occurred. My parents, embarking on one of their frequent European sojourns, entrusted my care to a governess. Miss Lillian was her name, a young woman of 19, whose father was a close associate of my own. It was a sweltering week in August when my story took place. They assured me they'd return in 7 days. On the third night, Miss Lillian invited her beau over, a gentleman from another influential family. She instructed me, with a sternness that belied her years, to remain in my quarters for the evening. "No matter what sounds you hear, stay put," she said. Her tone left no room for disobedience. I assumed they sought privacy for adult matters, so I buried myself in my books and let the night unfold. The chime of the doorbell broke the silence, followed by a deep, unfamiliar voice. The sounds of a television drama drifted up the staircase. Despite her warnings, my curiosity gnawed at me. I crept from my room and inched down the stairs. Peering around the corner, I caught sight of them entwined on the couch, lost in a romantic film. Content with my findings, I retreated to my room. Time passed, and then a quarrel erupted below. Shouts and sharp retorts pierced the air. I felt compelled to investigate, but Miss Lillian's earlier words reverberated in my mind, paralyzing me. A strange, suffocating dread settled in my chest, anchoring me in place. Suddenly, a scream shattered the night. A man's scream, filled with agony and terror. I thought it odd that our neighbors remained silent, but then, the television's volume was indeed quite high. Silence ensued, and with it fear took a firm grip on me. Instinct whispered that my room was my sanctuary. The house fell into a hush, save for the occasional thud from below. Nearly an hour later, the front door creaked open. An intruder? Footsteps ascended the staircase. In a panic, I dove into my wardrobe, my heart thundering against my ribs. The footsteps halted outside my door. The softest squeak signaled the opening of my door. Then, Miss Lillian's voice. "Are you in here, dear?" With trepidation, I answered, "In the closet." She opened the door, her face breaking into a playful grin. "What are you doing hiding in here?" I heard screaming, and then thumping, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. For a fleeting second, her smile faltered, her eyes turning icy. But she quickly recovered. "Oh, we were just spooked by a horror scene. I didn't want you to have nightmares, that's all." "But the banging noise?" I pressed. Her boyfriend had clumsily toppled a vase in his fright, she explained. "And the silence?" I inquired further. Her gaze hardened. "Why all the questions, dear?" I recoiled, sensing danger. She sighed, a fabricated tale of her boyfriend feeling unwell, and her accompanying him home followed. "We're good, right?" she asked, her smile strained. I nodded, and she led me downstairs to watch a film. For the next few days, she served meals with an odd-tasting meat, which I attributed to her poor culinary skills. A storm delayed my parents' return, extending Miss Lillian's stay. On the 11th day, craving a popsicle, I headed to the garage freezer. Miss Lillian called out after me, but I paid her no heed. Opening the freezer, I was met with a ghastly sight. The severed head of her boyfriend, liar, scrawled across his forehead. I stifled a gasp, closing the freezer slowly. Before I could turn, Miss Lillian's arms wrapped around me, a cold blade at my back. "Sweetheart, I've done a terrible thing," she cooed, her breath hot on my ear. "But you'll keep our secret, won't you? For your own sake." Tears streamed down my face as I nodded. She kissed my cheek, a twisted version of affection, and left me there, trembling. Years passed, and Miss Lillian remained a spectre at family events, always reminding me of our secret with a sly wink. I avoided her as much as possible, the memory of that night haunting me. Now, as I've taken the reins of one of my family's corporations, my parents announced it was time for me to meet my betrothed. I arrived at their estate, only to be greeted by Miss Lillian, adorned in a dress as if she were already celebrating our union. "What is she doing here?" I asked, my voice laced with dread. "Son, meet your future wife," my father declared, gesturing towards her. As she stepped closer, her finger traced a line up my throat. "We're going to be so happy together," she whispered, her voice laced with a threat. And there I stood, my parents oblivious to my terror, realizing I was bound to a monster with no escape in sight. A week ago, the world as we knew it came to an end. The deadly disease we called the Black Plague leaked from a science laboratory and rapidly enveloped the entire planet. People would die instantly when they entered the cloud of the disease. In the first few days, millions of lives were lost. By the end of the third day, only a few hundred people had managed to stay alive. I was one of those who had luckily survived. On the fourth day, the nightmare took an even darker turn. Those of us who had survived took refuge in an abandoned military base, only to have hordes of zombified humans start heading towards our base. We had only guns, knives, and a limited amount of ammunition. The zombies began to run towards the base's door, and the door was the only thing separating us from them. I was preparing to fight, but as a young teenager, I wasn't really cut out for battle. Those guarding the door reported that the zombies had entered. I heard someone shout that while the strong should stand against the zombies, others needed to go down into the base's underground. I ran as fast as I could towards the underground of the base. The underground was a series of corridors with mini-rooms at certain intervals. I was scared and didn't know what to do. I tried to control my thoughts when I heard screams and a chilling sound from upstairs. Then, I saw the zombies slowly advancing towards us. The zombies had black skins covered in blood. It was truly like a nightmare. Everyone started running in every direction through the corridors. I ran with a group of people to get even further away from the zombies. I kept running without looking back, but after a while, we were cornered by the zombies and started shooting and stabbing them. Thousands of thoughts were running through my mind. There were too many zombies. I felt something grab my foot and pull me. It was a big, strong-looking, tall man. He and his men took me and a few other young people away from the base. We sped away in an armored van. When I looked back, I saw the base being overrun by zombies. The air inside the tent was thick with despair and fear. Each of us, in our own inner worlds, pondered how this catastrophe would end. At night, even the sound of the wind made us anxious. We stayed awake thinking that the zombies could attack at any moment. One morning, we were awakened by the sound of engines from outside the tent. At first, everyone silently looked at each other, trying to understand whether this noise was friend or foe. A group of armed people approached the tent, but this time they were not zombies. They introduced themselves as the Salvation Union and offered to help us get to a safe zone known as humanity's last stronghold. The Salvation Union was gathering people who were immune to the disease, working to make a new start. Their technology was advanced enough to stop the spread of the disease and halt the zombies. This offer was the first good news we had heard in a long time. The leader of the union, Dr. Alara, explained to us that the disease was actually the result of a type of genetic mutation and that it was a man-made disaster. However, she said that there was an antidote to this mutation and they were on its trail. Under the protection of the Union, we set out in a convoy. Along the way, we encountered abandoned cities, collapsed bridges, and the remains of people who had lost their lives trying to escape the disease. Each scene laid bare the extent of the disaster. When we arrived at the safe zone, the sight that greeted us revived our hopes. It was a community well protected by high walls, self-sufficient and thriving. People were working, children were playing, and life was continuing, even in the shadow of the apocalypse. Dr. Ilara told us that the antidote was stored in a laboratory, but that area was now overrun by zombies. A team was being assembled to retrieve the antidote, and despite my youth, I wanted to be part of this mission. Perhaps this was the step that would change the fate of humanity and end this nightmare. After going through the training of the Salvation Union, our perilous journey to retrieve the antidote began. Each of us was ready to fight for the future of humanity, and I was determined to do everything I could to light a spark in this dark world. The first week we spent in the safe zone felt almost like a dream, a stark contrast to the constant fear and worry we endured to survive. However, this new order didn't erase the shadows of the past entirely. The pain of our losses and the trauma of what we'd experienced had left deep scars in each of our hearts. I was no different. There was a hollow feeling inside me whenever I thought of my family, friends, and my old life. However, deciding to join the antidote mission under the leadership of Dr. Ilara filled that void with a sense of purpose. Perhaps this would give meaning to what we've been through and serve as a tribute to the memory of our losses. The training process was arduous. We needed not only physical endurance but also the mental preparedness for this mission. The instructors of the Salvation Union educated us not only in combat techniques but also in survival skills under challenging circumstances. Each lesson instilled in us the determination and courage necessary to survive. With time, we developed a strong bond with the other members of the mission team. Each of us had a different story, but we shared a common purpose: to save humanity. Mia in our team was once a biochemistry student, now believing it was time to use her knowledge for the good of mankind. Lucas, a former firefighter, had always been the one to rush into danger first, and was now ready to show the same courage. As we set out towards the laboratory where the antidote was hidden, each of us had to confront our inner battles. The scenes we encountered along the way depicted the fragility of humanity and the deep wounds this disaster had inflicted. Upon reaching the laboratory, we had anticipated the challenges awaiting us, but the reality was far grimmer than we had imagined. The zombies had turned the laboratory into a fortress. Passing through them to get the antidote was equivalent to a suicide mission. Yet, we didn't lose hope. We waited for the cover of night and began to move as stealthily as possible. Each step endangered not just our lives, but also the future of humanity. Inside the laboratory, as we searched for the antidote, we also prayed not to encounter any zombies. Finally, we reached the highly secured room described by Dr. Ilara. The antidote had to be there. When we entered the room, a small vial stood before us, almost like the fruit of all our efforts and sacrifices. We had to grab it and swiftly make our way back. But the surprises awaiting us on the return journey indicated that our mission was far from over. The cold, sterile corridors of the laboratory echoed with the wild screams of the zombies. With the bag safely securing the antidote, Mia, Lucas, and I attempted to find a way through the darkness. Each corner could bring us face to face with death, and each door could harbor a new nightmare. Lucas took the lead, holding the flashlight with a determined yet shaky hand, illuminating our path. Mia strained her eyes, trying to read each label in the hope of finding a glimmer of hope in the darkness. I watched their backs, remaining vigilant against any potential attack. Suddenly, a shadow swiftly moved from one wall to another. We held our breath. Lucas put a finger to his lips, signaling the need for absolute silence. Among the shadows, the faces of the zombies, with eyes gleaming in the darkness, were watching us. Turning to us, Lucas whispered, "I'll count to 3. Start running and don't stop. I'll cover from behind." Despite the fear in our eyes, we had no choice but to trust him. 1, 2, 3. The sound of our steps echoed through the corridors, and the zombies sprang into action. We ran, running for our lives. Mia in front, me behind her, and Lucas like a guardian protecting us, running at the rear. As we reached the exit of the laboratory, the first rays of the sun were starting to appear on the horizon, but we hadn't reached safety. Outside, the other members of the Salvation Union were engaged in a battle with the zombies. We joined the fight. Protecting the antidote was more crucial than anything else. The battle was brutal and chaotic. Each bullet, each scream, reminded us of the bitter truths of this new world. But together, we fought for humanity's last stronghold. Finally, the onslaught of the zombies ceased. Exhausted and weary, we had managed to bring the antidote to the safe zone. When Dr. Ilara saw us, I could see the relief and the glimmer of hope in her eyes. She took the antidote and immediately began her work. Days passed and the effects of the antidote started to be observed. The first treated individuals began to recover from the effects of the illness. It was a victory for us, but the war was not yet over. The Salvation Union began planning to distribute the antidote worldwide. This new mission might be even more challenging than the previous one, but now we had hope, a beacon guiding us through the darkness. Mia, Lucas, and I were preparing for a new mission. This time we would carry the antidote to all corners of the world and witness the rebirth of humanity. This journey might separate us from our families and loved ones, but it was a sacrifice we willingly accepted. In the shadow of the apocalypse, our journey of hope continued. The discovery of the antidote was a moment of triumph for everyone in the safe zone. However, we had very little time to savor this victory. The leaders of the Salvation Alliance had to expedite the plan to distribute the antidote worldwide, as time was our greatest enemy. Mia, Lucas, and I were part of the team, tasked with the first shipment of the antidote. Our mission was to deliver the antidote to surviving communities in different parts of the world. But this was a far more challenging task than we had imagined. The disease had spread to every corner of the world, and zombies had invaded the once thriving heart of civilization, the cities. Our first target was what used to be the great metropolis, but had now turned into a ghost town, New York. The city was not only overrun by zombies, but had also been occupied by lawless groups who had survived the disease, but lost their humanity. These groups saw any atrocity permissible in their struggle for survival. As we approached New York, we could see smoke rising among the skyscrapers. The city was dark and silent, but this silence was deceptive. At any moment, an attack could come from anywhere. Our helicopter landed in an area near Central Park. We quickly secured the perimeter. As we unloaded the crates carrying the antidote, we were vigilant, watching every move. Every sound was an alarm. However, we encountered an unexpected challenge. A group of thugs, having gotten wind of the antidote, had laid an ambush for us. Suddenly, we found ourselves in the midst of intense gunfire erupting around us. Lucas immediately established a defensive line. Mia and I remained within the perimeter to protect the antidote. Amidst bullets flying around us, we realized the overwhelming number of the thugs. This battle couldn't be won by arms alone. Mia swiftly devised a plan. "We need to use the antidote," she said. "If we can offer it to them, perhaps they might prefer to listen instead of fighting." The plan was risky, but we had no other choice. We raised a white flag to propose a truce. The leader of the thugs approached cautiously. We showed him the antidote and explained it was a chance to end this war. The thug leader accepted the antidote and the hope it promised. This was not just the end of a battle, but potentially the savior of many lives. After this initial success in New York, our mission to distribute the antidote worldwide continued. Each region harbored its own challenges and dangers, but every successful delivery ignited a ray of hope in the shadow of the apocalypse. Following the distribution in New York, we set out to reach other parts of the world. Each delivery was a victory for humanity, but every triumph brought forth new challenges. The next stop for the distribution of the antidote was the hot savannas of Africa. Here, scattered tribes and communities fought to survive in the wake of the disease. Yet among these groups, some had developed a natural resistance to the disease. Their genetic makeup could play a critical role in enhancing the effectiveness of the antidote. Lucas, Mia, and I were tasked with a research team to locate these resistant individuals and collect samples from them. But this mission was fraught with unexpected challenges. While the wildlife remained unaffected by the disease, in a world filled with zombies and humans willing to do anything to survive, every step was a potential danger. One day, we encountered a tribe. They had remained untouched by the disease and had managed to preserve their community. However, they were wary of anyone from the outside world. Gaining their trust wouldn't be easy. Through Mia's scientific knowledge and communication skills, we managed to establish a dialogue with the tribal leader. We explained the importance of the antidote and what it meant for the world. Gradually, we succeeded in gaining their support. The tribe shared with us the secret of their resistance. This information became a new turning point in the development of the antidote. The scientists of the Salvation Alliance could further enhance the antidote's efficacy with this new knowledge. However, every step forward brought new challenges. As the effectiveness of the antidote increased, powers seeking to control it began to emerge. Some surviving groups sought to exploit the antidote for their own interests, even considering it as a weapon. This new threat was an unexpected test for the Salvation Alliance. Protecting and fairly distributing the antidote became increasingly challenging. Our task was not only to distribute the antidote, but also to ensure its fair and equal usage for everyone. Lucas, Mia, and I were at the forefront of this new mission. We fought to protect the antidote and ensure the rebirth of humanity. Each day we contributed to nurturing hope in this post-apocalyptic world. Leaving the hot lands of Africa, we continued to carry the light of the antidote to the other dark corners of the world. Each new place had its own world, story, and pains. The power of the antidote had become humanity's hope, but safeguarding and spreading this hope became increasingly intricate by the day. When we reached the densely populated cities of Asia, the scene we encountered was a testament to the brutality of the apocalypse. The cities had been abandoned and devastated. Streets had turned into battlefields for zombies and surviving humans. Distributing the antidote here required a strategic war plan. Guided by Lucas's military experience, we navigated through zombie herds while attempting to reach surviving communities. Each delivery became more dangerous and urgent than the last. One night, we encountered a group of survivors who had established a shelter in the underground tunnels of the city. These people had created their small community away from the chaos on the surface. However, their need for the antidote surpassed the dangers they faced above ground. Mia's scientific expertise and her belief in people instilled hope within this community. When we delivered the antidote to them, their initial skepticism and fear transformed into gratitude and hope. It was an unforgettable moment for us, a testament to humanity's resilience and the possibility of hope prevailing. However, the power of the antidote not only healed the survivors, but also became the source of new conflicts. Groups seeking to acquire the antidote resorted to all means to expand their dominance. This compelled the Salvation Alliance to develop a new strategy. As guardians of the antidote, we had to confront these new threats. Ensuring fair distribution and utilization of the antidote for humanity had become the most crucial part of our mission. As days and weeks passed, the world began to show signs of healing through the antidote's effects. People who survived the disease started rebuilding their shattered cities and communities. In this process, we were transforming. Every success and every failure made us stronger. Lucas, Mia, and I were not just survivors anymore. We had become integral figures in the reconstruction of this new world. As the antidote reached every corner of the world, we bore witness to the rebirth of humanity. And thus, our journey of hope, born in the shadow of the apocalypse, continued on the path leading to the rebirth of humanity. When our mission in the crowded cities of Asia was completed, the effect of the antidote was becoming increasingly prominent worldwide. People had freed themselves from the grip of the disease and began reconstructing their communities and lives. Yet this new beginning was built upon the ruins of the old world, and each new structure carried the shadows of the past. The rainforests of South America were the next destination for the antidote's distribution. Here, the power of nature had acted as a shield against the zombie invasion, allowing some indigenous communities to survive in isolation. However, this isolation had severed their ties with the world, keeping them unaware of the existence of the antidote. Our task was to reach these communities and offer them the antidote. But this time, the challenges we faced were not only human or zombie-related. Nature itself was an obstacle. The dense rainforests posed dangers at every step. Poisonous plants, predatory animals, and deceptive terrains tested us at every turn. Under Lucas's leadership, and with the guidance of a local guide, we set forth on a journey to the heart of the forest. Each of us knew that this journey was not merely a physical trial, but also a spiritual one. The forest reminded us of human vulnerability in the face of nature and the strength of the survival instinct. After a challenging journey lasting several days, we reached a native community. Living far from the modern world, they were dedicated to the traditions of their ancestors. Gaining their trust was crucial for them to accept the antidote. Mia, utilizing her scientific knowledge and empathy, initiated contact with the community's shaman. She explained what the antidote was, how it worked, and how it could safeguard their community. The shaman understood the antidote and our intentions, eventually accepting it. It marked a triumph of cross-cultural understanding and collaboration. As we offered the antidote to the community, their doubts and fears gave way to hope. Witnessing people beginning to heal made all our challenges feel worthwhile. However, with the global spread of the antidote, a new issue arose. Its distribution began to shift power dynamics in certain regions. Some groups started to wield the antidote as a symbol of power, even viewing it as a political tool. This divergence risked deviating the antidote from its purpose and potentially sparking new conflicts. The Salvation Union began developing new protocols to to oversee the distribution of the antidote and ensure its fair use. We continued our efforts to implement these protocols in the field. As we departed from the rainforests of South America, the ripples created by the global dissemination of the antidote were increasingly growing. Each wave was both a herald of healing and new conflicts. As the antidote's potency continued to alter humanity's fate, our journey entered a new phase. The historical cities of Europe were our next destination. Here, once thriving societies and advanced technology had succumbed to ruin and silence. Disease had gripped the continent, transforming once lively streets into ghostly cities. Lucas, Mia, and I devised a new strategy to reach surviving groups scattered across different regions of Europe. While these groups had formed resilient communities, isolation and fear had disconnected them from the outside world. One of our first stops was Paris, once the heart of art and culture. The city, now desolate, bore the traces of apocalypse upon its renowned art and monuments. Here, in the underground shelters beneath the Louvre Museum, we found a group of survivors. They had become custodians of art and history, striving to preserve these works for future generations. Mia's scientific expertise and love for art facilitated an immediate connection with this group. Offering them the antidote resulted in a transformation from skepticism to hope. Preserving art would play a significant role in humanity's rebirth. Yet, the antidote's potency revived certain old power structures. Some former governments and organizations sought to reassert control using the antidote. This became one of the greatest challenges confronting the Salvation Union. While we struggled to ensure the fair and equitable distribution of the antidote, we also had to contend with the threats posed by these re-emerging power structures. Lucas's leadership and strategic acumen were instrumental in standing against these new threats. With days passing, the impact of the antidote began to be felt across Europe. People who had survived disease began rebuilding their shattered cities and re-establishing their communities. In this process, we too evolved. Each success and setback further strengthened us. As hope sprouted in the rejuvenated cities of Europe, our next leg took us to one of the world's coldest regions, Siberia. Here, people struggled not only against the zombie threat, but also the freezing cold and isolation. Delivering the antidote to these remote lands would alleviate the challenges faced by the survivors, offering them a chance at a new life. Clad in cold-resistant attire, Lucas, Mia, and I traversed the frozen expanses using sleds and snowmobiles. In the vast plains of Siberia, we found small surviving communities scattered across old mining towns and abandoned research stations. These people grappled with the hardships of solitude and constant threats. When we delivered the antidote, a ray of hope illuminated their cold faces. Witnessing the change in their eyes made every second of this arduous journey worthwhile. Yet, Siberia's harsh conditions made the distribution of the antidote challenging. Frozen terrain and biting winds obstructed every move, turning each step into a struggle. Lucas's military experience and Mia's scientific acumen were crucial in surmounting these obstacles. At one point, amid the remnants of an old military base, we encountered a group of survivors using heavy weaponry to defend against zombies. Unaware of the existence of the antidote, they waged their own battles. When we informed them about the antidote and the events elsewhere, they gradually lowered their arms and began collaborating with us. Upon completing our mission in Siberia, the effects of the antidote were clearly visible worldwide. People freed from disease and the zombie threat were ready to make a fresh start. However, this new world had to be carefully constructed to avoid repeating the mistakes of the old world. The efforts of the Salvation Union, in collaboration with communities worldwide, were laying the groundwork for a new civilization. We had assumed significant roles in constructing this new world. Lucas, Mia, and I were no longer just survivors. We were also architects of this new world. Thus, our journey of hope, born amidst the shadow of apocalypse, continued, overcoming every challenge, nurturing every hope on the path to humanity's rebirth. The new world emerged from the ashes of the old, and we were etched into history as witnesses and creators of this new beginning. As the freezing winds of Siberia receded, the pace of changes wrought by the global spread of the antidote accelerated worldwide. Humanity transitioned from the struggle for survival after the apocalypse to the rebuilding and establishment of a new society. In this new phase, our roles evolved. We were no longer mere distributors, but also advisors and guides. When we arrived in the vast plains and great cities of North America, the scene was different from other continents. Survivors had swiftly organized and established a robust communication network among themselves, yet this organization was at risk of repeating the mistakes of the old world. Lucas, Mia, and I met with the leaders of these new communities. We shared our experiences with other global communities and the lessons we learned about distributing the antidote. Through collaboration, we attempted to ensure the fair and effective use of the antidote. While the zombie threat lessened in this new world, we observed people trying to revert to their old ways of life. Cities were being rebuilt, agriculture and industry were reviving. However, this reconstruction also bore the risk of bringing back the injustices and inequalities of the old world. Mia's scientific background and deep dedication to people aided the sustainable and fair development of these new communities. She articulated how technology and science should serve humanity. Lucas, with his expertise in ensuring security and order, led the reformed military and police forces, becoming the guardians of the new order. Throughout this process, we underwent change. What began as a journey of mere survival had turned us into leaders shaping the future of humanity. Upon completion of our mission in North America, stronger connections and collaboration between communities worldwide had emerged. The global reach of the antidote had marked the end of one of the darkest periods in human history, and the doors to a new era had opened. And so our journey of hope, born amidst the shadow of apocalypse, continued, overcoming every challenge, nurturing every hope on the path to humanity's rebirth. The new world emerged from the ashes of the old, and we were etched into history as witnesses and creators of this new beginning. Humanity had once again proven that hope persists even in the darkest times. As the first sprouts of the new world order appeared, our story had reached a turning point. After our contributions to the reconstruction in North America, the strengthened bonds between global communities had transitioned from merely surviving to supporting each other and growing together. However, the tests of this new solidarity were far from over. Africa was our next destination. Here, diverse climates and geographies had led surviving communities to face different challenges. From the hot sands of the Sahara Desert to the tropical forests of Madagascar, the distribution of the antidote posed yet another test for us. Leading Salvation Union teams dispersed across various corners of Africa, Lucas, Mia, and I faced the arduous task of ensuring the antidote reached every corner. Handling the necessary logistics and coordination for the antidote's reach was no easy feat, yet overcoming each challenge had become a way of life for us. A significant challenge we encountered in Africa was the limited water resources, complicating the distribution of the antidote. Mia's scientific knowledge played a vital role in establishing crucial water purification and distribution systems. Lucas's experience in ensuring security and order protected us against threats we encountered. Meeting surviving communities across different regions of Africa, we were deeply moved by their cultural richness and resilience. They stood as living proof of human strength in the face of adversity, showcasing remarkable resilience. Working with these communities, we learned much from them. Their traditional knowledge and ability to live in harmony with nature held a crucial place in shaping the New World Order. Preserving and transferring this wisdom became a priority during the antidote's distribution. Upon the completion of our mission in Africa, the impact of the antidote was felt across every corner of the continent. People liberated from disease and the zombie threat had begun tilling their lands and rebuilding their communities. Yet this fresh start had to be carefully managed to avoid repeating the errors of the old world. As we left behind the dusty roads and budding hopes of Africa, the connections among global communities had moved beyond mere survival struggles to supporting each other and collaborating for growth. The efforts of the Salvation Union had reunited the once fragmented human family. But the tests of this new unity were far from over. The continent of Asia was our next target. Here, surviving communities had formed strong fortresses within the shadows of high mountains and across vast plains. However, within the confines of these fortresses, some dark remnants of the old world order lingered. Lucas, Mia, and I were guiding Salvation Union teams scattered across various regions of Asia. Ensuring the reach of the antidote to every corner was always our mission. But this time the challenges we faced were not just physical, but also contained ideological and cultural barriers. In some regions, remnants of old regimes aimed to preserve their power and use the antidote for their own interests. This situation highlighted the strategic leadership of Lucas and the diplomatic skills of Mia. They made efforts to persuade these old power structures and instill the principles of justice and equality of the New World Order. In the vast steppes of Asia, we encountered nomadic communities sustaining traditional ways of life. They were relatively less affected by the collapse of the modern world and had survived using their traditional knowledge. While embracing the hope brought by the antidote, these communities also preserved their cultural heritage. During this process, we underwent a significant transformation. The struggle for survival had turned us into leaders shaping the future of humanity. We were now responsible for laying the foundations of the New World Order and planning humanity's next steps. When our mission in Asia was completed, the influence of the antidote was felt in every corner of the continent. People liberated from disease and the zombie threat had begun cultivating their lands and rebuilding their communities. However, this new beginning had to be carefully managed to avoid repeating the mistakes of the old world. After witnessing the various facets of Asia and becoming beacons of hope for the communities there, the connections between global communities had evolved beyond mere survival struggles to supporting and collaborating for collective growth. Yet, the tests of this new unity were not yet over. Humanity had to confront internal divisions. South America was our next target. Here, across the peaks of the Andes Mountains to the deep forests of the Amazon, surviving communities had established strong fortresses within their confines. However, within these fortresses, some dark remnants of the old world order were hidden. Lucas, Mia, and I were guiding Salvation Union teams scattered across various regions of South America. Ensuring the reach of the antidote to every corner was always our mission. But this time the challenges we faced were not just physical, but also contained ideological and cultural barriers. In some regions, remnants of old regimes aimed to preserve their power and use the antidote for their own interests. This situation highlighted the strategic leadership of Lucas and the diplomatic skills of Mia. They made efforts to persuade these old power structures and instill the principles of justice and equality of the New World Order. In the depths of the Amazon, we encountered communities where the power of nature still prevailed. They were relatively less affected by the collapse of the modern world and had survived using their traditional knowledge. While embracing the hope brought by the antidote, these communities also preserved their cultural heritage. During this process, we underwent a significant transformation. The struggle for survival had turned us into leaders shaping the future of humanity. We were now responsible for laying the foundations of the New World Order and planning humanity's next steps. When our mission in South America was completed, the influence of the antidote was felt in every corner of the continent. People liberated from disease and the zombie threat had begun cultivating their lands and rebuilding their communities. However, this new beginning had to be carefully managed to avoid repeating the mistakes of the old world. The sounds of hope echoing beneath the green cover of South America marked a turning point for us. As the Salvation Union, the connections we established between communities worldwide had evolved beyond mere survival struggles to supporting and collaborating for collective growth. Yet, the tests of this new unity were not over. Humanity had to face internal divisions. Antarctica was our next and most unexpected target. Here we discovered a community of scientists who had managed to survive isolated from the rest of the world, hidden beneath the ice. They had continued their crucial research initiated before the apocalypse and made promising new discoveries for the future of humanity. Lucas, Mia, and I made a challenging journey to reach this isolated community. We navigated through the ice, confronting the coldest winds to bring the antidote to this last frontier. However, the challenges we encountered here were not limited to physical obstacles. The scientists in Antarctica had established their own community and redefined the role of science in the post-apocalyptic world. They viewed the distribution of the antidote as just the beginning and were working on scientific advancements necessary for humanity to build a sustainable future. Mia showed great interest in the scientists' research and exchanged information with them to develop projects beneficial to communities worldwide. Lucas developed strategies to ensure the security of this new and isolated community and establish their connection with the outside world. Our mission in Antarctica laid the groundwork for the steps humanity would take in the fields of science and technology. Solutions were developed for the new challenges the post-apocalyptic world might face, and these solutions were conveyed to communities worldwide. Upon completion of our mission, the community of scientists in Antarctica had started collaborating with other communities worldwide. Humanity, liberated from disease and the zombie threat, began cultivating their lands and rebuilding their communities using science and technology. As the icy winds of Antarctica melted behind us, the connections that the Salvation Union had established with communities worldwide were opening a new chapter in humanity's reconstruction. Yet, the trials of this new beginning were not over. Humanity had to confront internal divisions and external threats. Our next target was hidden in the depths of the oceans. Here we discovered communities that had managed to survive in underwater cities, isolated from the rest of the world. They had sought refuge in the depths of the seas before the apocalypse, creating a new life using the underwater ecosystems. Lucas, Mia, and I embarked on a dangerous journey in submarines to reach these isolated communities. In the dark waters of the ocean, amidst the shadows of deep-sea creatures, we brought the antidote to this last frontier. However, the challenges we faced here were not limited to physical obstacles. The inhabitants of the underwater cities had formed their own communities and redefined the role of oceans in the post-apocalyptic world. They saw the distribution of the antidote as just a beginning and were working on managing ocean resources necessary for humanity to build a sustainable future. Mia exchanged knowledge about marine biology and the preservation of ecosystems with these communities to develop projects beneficial to communities worldwide. Lucas developed strategies to ensure the security of this new and isolated community and establish their connection with the outside world. Our mission in the underwater cities laid the groundwork for humanity to utilize and preserve ocean resources, creating a sustainable life in these regions. Solutions were developed for the new challenges the post-apocalyptic world might face, and these solutions were conveyed to communities worldwide. Upon the completion of our mission, the inhabitants of the underwater cities began collaborating with other communities worldwide. Humanity, liberated from disease and the zombie threat, began cultivating their lands and rebuilding their communities using the depths of the oceans. As we emerged from the hidden worlds beneath the oceans, we were met with news from all over the world. The Salvation Union had opened a new chapter in humanity's reconstruction, yet the trials of this new beginning were not over. Humanity was striving to build a future in harmony with nature's unique balances. The North Pole was our next and most challenging target. Here, amid melting glaciers, we discovered small but resilient communities that had managed to survive isolated from the rest of the world. They had adapted to the harsh living conditions in the polar regions before the apocalypse, and kindled a warm flame of hope in the midst of the cold. Lucas, Mia, and I made a challenging journey through snow-covered terrain to reach these isolated communities. In the cold of the polar winds, amidst polar bears and snowstorms, we brought the antidote to this last frontier. However, the challenges we faced here were not limited to physical obstacles. The polar communities had developed their own survival techniques and redefined the role of polar regions in the post-apocalyptic world. They considered the distribution of the antidote as just a beginning and shared knowledge necessary for humanity to live sustainably in cold climates. Mia exchanged knowledge about polar ecology and sustainable living techniques with these communities to develop projects beneficial to communities worldwide. Lucas developed strategies to ensure the security of this new and isolated community and establish their connection with the outside world. Our mission in the North Pole laid the groundwork for humanity to live and preserve these regions and build a life in harmony with nature. Solutions were developed for the new challenges the post-apocalyptic world might face, and these solutions were conveyed to communities worldwide. Upon completion of our mission, the polar communities started collaborating with other communities worldwide. Humanity, liberated from disease and the zombie threat, began to build a new life in the cold of the poles and to rebuild their communities. In the freezing cold of the North Pole, feeling the warmth of hope, we, Lucas, Mia, and I, witnessed the rebirth of humanity. As leaders of the Salvation Union, we brought together communities that had survived worldwide and provided them with the antidote. Each community contributed its unique knowledge to the collective memory of humanity, laying the foundations for a new civilization. On this journey full of challenges and threats, humanity rediscovered itself and started building a future in harmony with nature's balances. The threat of zombies and the fear of the hell plague were now left behind. The new world was emerging from the ashes of the old world, wiser and more resilient. Lucas was remembered as a leader who united communities with his strategic intelligence. Mia, with her knowledge and diplomatic abilities, built bridges between different cultures. And I remained as the storyteller of this tale, a memory keeper for future generations. Together we became symbols of hope and solidarity in the post-apocalyptic world. Years passed and the world slowly regained its former greenery. Cities were rebuilt in harmony with the requirements of nature. Communities began learning from each other's knowledge and experiences, moving towards a sustainable life. Technology developed in harmony with nature, serving humanity. And finally, one day, all the communities worldwide came together to celebrate the birth of a new civilization. It was not just a celebration, but also a ceremony of oath. Humanity pledged not to repeat the mistakes of the past, and to protect this new world. Our journey of hope, which began in the shadow of the apocalypse, ended by overcoming every difficulty and nurturing every hope on the path to humanity's rebirth. The new world was born from the ashes of the old, and we, as witnesses and creators of this new beginning, were etched into history. Humanity showed once again that hope persists even in the darkest times. And now, in this new world, each of us continues to write our own story. Hope can thrive even in the shadow of the apocalypse, and humanity can be reborn even in the most challenging times. Spend the night in an old mansion in New Orleans, tracing the echoes of a tragedy that unfolded in the early 19th century. During the construction of the mansion, Marcel, one of the cornerstone carriers, mysteriously disappeared and was never found. Since then, Countless stories have circulated about Marcel's ghost wandering the corridors of the house. The owner of the mansion, after Marcel's disappearance, faced mysterious occurrences. Reports of objects moving on their own, strange sounds, and occasional manifestations of ghostly traces from the past increased. Some guests even claimed to hear Marcel's mournful cries. At one point, the lost love of the mansion's former owner, Eva, emerged. The ghost of Eva, learning about Marcel's tragic fate, began to roam the mansion in search. According to some, the ghosts of Marcel and Eva, coming together, work collaboratively to complete their stories from the past. Today, the mansion is still open to visitors. Those daring enough can wander through the old corridors and perhaps feel the traces of the past. Guests claim to sense the melancholic presence of Marcel during their nights in the old mansion, believing that the ghosts of Eva and Marcel are working together to reunite their love story from the past. In the early 1900s, it was a new beginning for Samuel Turner and his family in Greenfield, a quiet town in Ohio. However, shortly after moving into their new home, mysterious events began to unfold, shrouding the town in an air of mystery. The Turner family started hearing strange noises at night, children's laughter, an old piano melody, and occasionally the distant voice of a woman. Over time, this woman's voice came to be known as the Greenfield Ghost among the townsfolk. Many believed this ghost to be Clara Morton, a former homeowner who had once shared the same house with the Turner family, but met a tragic end due to a property dispute. Rumors circulated that before her death, Clara left a curse upon the Turner family. As the days under the influence of the Greenfield Ghost passed, unrest grew among the townspeople. When Samuel Turner fell suddenly ill and passed away, some in the town believed that the mysterious ghost had taken revenge for Clara Morton. The house was eventually abandoned, yet rumors persisted that it still carried the presence of that haunting ghost. Today, the Turner family's old home in Greenfield stands empty and quiet. Those with the courage can wander around the old house at night, still shaken by the laughter, piano music, and the distant woman's voice that lingers. The legend of the Greenfield ghost remains vivid in the town's memory, and the poignant tale of her ghost continues to be passed down through generations. 5 decades post the civil strife, the city of Charleston, South Carolina, emerged. In the wake of its establishment in 1875, a dire need for massive quantities of steel arose to mend the crumbling infrastructure of the United States. This prompted Captain Alexander Thornfield to initiate the construction of Thornfield Foundries. A mere 12 months later, the company welcomed a multitude of employees through its gates, as documented on its official website. The roles within the smelting furnaces were both sophisticated and perilous, leading to an alarming number of workers meeting their demise within the fiery confines. As the early 1900s unfolded, the working conditions took a darker turn with the arrival of a relentless overseer known as Iron Hand Ike. Fueled by a relentless pursuit of heightened productivity, Ike orchestrated perilous gambles that led to a surge in accidents, resulting in the on-site deaths of nearly 50 laborers during his tenure, as reported by Chronicles of Industry. Legend has it that in a retaliatory act in 1907, some daring workers pushed Iron Hand Ike into the searing furnace. Even today, the remnants of Thornfield Foundries stand as a chilling testament to its haunting past. Adventurous souls who tread upon its grounds might catch whispers of Iron Hand Ike's authoritative commands echoing through time, compelling phantom shadows and encounters with otherworldly phenomena. The memories of that fateful day in high school still haunt me. It wasn't a conventional haunting, with ghostly apparitions or eerie whispers. No, what lingered in my mind was the unsettling mystery that unfolded during that unexpected lockdown. It all began innocently enough, the routine of school life proceeding until the mundane was shattered by the blaring school bell and the ominous voice over the intercom. Lockdown. Panic seized the air, and I found myself caught in the chaos of closing doors and hushed whispers. I had to think fast. With the bathroom inaccessible, I took refuge in the janitor's closet. Little did I know, I had just stepped into the epicenter of a bizarre and otherworldly incident. As the world outside descended into madness, I eavesdropped on a conversation that defied all logic. The voices on the other side of the door weren't law enforcement. They were something else entirely. The chief spoke of a suspect, someone or something that had infiltrated the school. The ominous mention of an institute, the responsibility, and the eerie description of the being sent shivers down my spine. The tension escalated as orders were barked, and then the unthinkable happened. The chief's command to apprehend the suspect was met with a scream so grotesque it transcended the realm of human terror. It was a sound from nightmares, a guttural wail that made my blood run cold. Gunshots erupted, punctuating the air, but they weren't ordinary shots. The subsequent silence was more disconcerting than the cacophony that preceded it. I dared to peek through a bullet hole, only to witness a grotesque scene of violence perpetrated by a creature that defied the laws of nature. Limbs elongated, movements impossible. It was a nightmare made flesh. The chief's revelation about the suspect's ability to mimic anyone sent my mind into a whirlwind of paranoia. Had I encountered this entity before, unknowingly sharing space with a shapeshifter in the guise of a classmate or teacher? The cleanup that followed, swift and efficient, was anything but human. The incongruities piled up, the unscathed janitor's closet, the abrupt replacement of the door, the missing details in the news reports. It was a conspiracy woven with threads of the supernatural. Days later, the official narrative emerged. A student, armed and dangerous, apprehended without a scratch. A story that reeked of cover-up, a tale that sought to bury the unearthly reality I had witnessed. As I returned to the semblance of normalcy, questions haunted me. What was that creature? Was it truly gone? Or did it merely lie dormant, waiting for the right moment to strike again? The unknown loomed, and the echoes of that chilling scream continued to reverberate in the hidden corridors of my mind. Between 1940 and 1956, George Metesky, known as the Mad Bomber, planted over 30 bombs in public places in New York, injuring at least 15 people. Placing these bombs in locations such as Radio City Music Hall, the New York Public Library, and Pennsylvania Station, he wrote mocking letters to local newspapers and continued his actions until his arrest in 1957. It was later revealed that he was mentally ill, and he was confined to a psychiatric hospital. When it comes to eerie places, you can't get more unsettling than an old mental asylum. While many former psychiatric hospitals have been repurposed or closed down, others have been left abandoned, with rumors of the lingering ghosts of patients who met their end there. The Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum in Weston, West Virginia, has mostly stood empty since its closure in the mid-1990s, though a few small museums operated there in the early 2000s. These days, you can take a historical tour or a ghost tour in the evening. If you're truly up for a challenge, join an intense 8-hour ghost hunt on Saturday nights. The site also served as a military post during the Civil War, so in addition to the tales of hundreds of mentally ill patients, there are reports of Civil War spirits haunting the facility. A father went to say goodnight to his 7-year-old son, very well knowing that if he didn't, his son would have trouble sleeping. It was a nightly routine between them. He entered the dimly lit room, where his son waited under his blanket. With the first glance, the father could tell there was something unusual about his son tonight, but couldn't put his finger on it. He looked the same, but had a grin that drew from ear to ear. "You okay, buddy?" the father asked. The son nodded, still with the grin, before saying, "Daddy, check for monsters under my bed." The father chuckled a bit before getting on his knees to check, only to satisfy his son. There, under the bed, pale and afraid, was his son. His real son, he whispered. "Daddy, there's someone on my bed." There, a doctor was working at a hospital where the patients were tagged with colored bands. Green, alive. Red, deceased. One night, The doctor was instructed to get a few supplies from the basement of the hospital, and so he headed to the lift. The lift doors opened, and there was a patient inside, minding her own business. Patients were allowed to roam around the hospital to stretch, especially those who have stayed long. The rule was to be back in their rooms before 10. The doctor smiled at the patient before pressing the number for the basement. He found it unusual that the woman didn't have a button already pressed. He wondered if she was heading to the basement too. The lift finally reached the floor where the doors opened. In the distance, a man was limping towards the elevator, and in a panic, the doctor slammed the elevator button to close. It finally did, and the lift began to ascend back up, the doctor's heart pounding. "Why did you do that?" He was trying to use the lift. The woman stated, annoyed. "Did you see his wrist?" The doctor asked. "It was red. He died last night. I would know because I did his surgery." The woman lifted her wrist. He saw red. She smiled. "Like this one?" "Last night, a friend quickly ushered me out of the house to catch the opening performance at a local bar's music night. After a few drinks, I realized my phone wasn't in my pocket. I checked the table we were sitting at, the tables in the bar, and the bathrooms, but unfortunately, I couldn't find anything. Eventually, I used my friend's phone to call mine. After 2 rings, someone answered, let out a low and raspy laugh, and hung up. They didn't answer again. I finally gave up hope and headed home. I found my phone on my nightstand, right where I left it. After finding my phone next to the nightstand, suddenly the night lamp turned on by itself. This incident plunged me into deep fear, and I didn't want to stay at home that night. Due to the eerie atmosphere that had formed, I immediately went outside and decided to stay at a friend's place. The strange event that occurred where my phone was found affected me throughout the night, and I preferred to feel safe somewhere else rather than staying at home. The legend of Charlie No-Face first spread among children in 1960s Pennsylvania. It was said that a figure known as the Green Man, with no face, would wander the streets at night, glowing green as a result of an industrial accident. While the legend was unsettling enough, the reality was much more frightening and tragic. The person believed to be the subject of the legend was actually 8-year-old Raymond Robinson, who accidentally electrocuted himself with 11,000 volts of electricity in 1919, causing his face to be severely disfigured. Despite the injuries that distorted his face and arms, Robinson survived.